So we have been given the good stuff, and we've been experiencing the good stuff, but we have to be able to live in the good stuff even when Kendra and Forrester are not leading us in. So that's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the good stuff. They just gave us a taste of it, right? All right, so I would just like to say for the record, there is no place I would rather be right now than right here with all of you and just feeling so high on his presence and the Word, which is his presence, because the Word is encrypted with the very life of the Lord Jesus Christ. So the Word is there to get us high, so just so we know. So in the Middle Ages, there was a word that the alchemists used, and the word was elixir. And that word, it's probably Greek or Latin, I'm not really sure, but it came into English usage in the Middle Ages because the alchemists were looking for something. They were looking for a substance that would turn base metals into gold. That's what alchemists did. And so that's what they were looking for, and they called this mysterious, elusive, they didn't find it yet, substance, they called it elixir. And elixir also means a substance capable of giving the imbiber immortality, just life that never ends. And we also use it today just meaning kind of like a cure-all, So God's elixir to us is his offer and his provision in Christ of a divine, supernatural, mystical, amazing, something called Sabbath Rest. We call it Sabbath Rest, but actually in Hebrew, Sabbath means to cease from, to stop, And so, Sabbath Rest is really an amazing, beautiful place in God. It's a realm of authority and favor and flow and peace that is peace in the chaos. It's stillness in the storm. It's not a lack of storm or a lack of stuff going on or a lack of circumstances, but it's this amazing place of rest in the midst of it. And the Sabbath that was given to the Jews, to the Israelites, was a picture of something that was coming, that is available to us, it's been offered to us in Jesus. It is not for us just a one-day kind of taste of rest, but it is a 24/7, 365 ongoing experience that we have in the presence of the Lord Jesus. Now, we take weekends for granted, we take Sundays and Sabbath for granted, but you have to realize, the Jews were the only people that had a day off. Nobody else had a day off. This was a brand new idea that our God brought to the planet. It was just unheard of, that you just would have a day when you just didn't do anything. And over time, it became legalistic, and there were problems with that. But the general idea of it was to give people a taste. The idea is there is a place in God where he will provide, and we don't have to be struggling. We don't have to be in conflict. We don't have to be exerting to get things done. So, thought storms, circumstances assail us. They come from the inside and they come from the outside. But we are not meant to be just tossed around like paper boats in a wind. We are called to be victors. We are called to win. And we're not called to be battered and damaged and helpless and victimized by every wind of circumstance and every thought storm that comes our way. We are more than conquerors through Jesus, through our King of Kings. And so in Hebrews 7, basically God says, today, if you will not harden your heart, there is still a rest for the people of God. And he said, if you will not harden your heart today. He says that 3 times in 2 chapters. if you will not harden your heart. And we'll come back to that. And it also says in, I think it's maybe the one of the last verses of Hebrews 3, that in the wilderness, the reason that the people in the wilderness did not enter into his rest was because their hardness of heart meant that they could not mix the word with faith. Because our hardness of heart basically is a judgment against God. And if we are making judgments against him, obviously that impedes faith. It's kind of the opposite of faith, actually, you know. So hard heart is a kind of unbelief. And we're gonna talk about hard heart later, you know. There are examples of a hard heart. Our heart is hardened when we just have a revelation deficit of his extreme, ongoing, constant goodness toward me, toward you in any circumstance. My circumstances could be totally crashing. I mean, everything could just be going wrong. I mean, Jesus did not say, oh, if you come to me, it's going to be good. It's going to be like magic. Everything's going to be perfect. In fact, what he said in John, I think it's 16:33, he says, in this world, you're going to have losses, problems, storms, trials. But hey, take courage, be of good heart, because I have overcome the world for you. I have deprived it of power, ultimately, to harm you. I have deprived it of its power to actually damage you on the inside irreparably. I've deprived it of its harm to make it so that you can't access me, my goodness, my, you know, the treasures of my kingdom, my presence, and all that. So, you know, I want to say about the Sabbath rest that it is not a mandate. It is an unbelievable gift. What God says to his people or to his worshipers, you don't have to drum up your own rest or like work for it. Just join yourself with me. You can just have my rest. My rest is eternal, perfect, ongoing, completely accessible to you because I'm making you one with me. What God says, you don't have to drum up or come up with your own joy. Just become one with me. You can have my joy. My joy is unspeakable. My joy is in every circumstance. He says, you don't have to come up with your own peace. You don't have to work for it. Just get close to me, like become one with me. Let me come and live inside of you and let my life unfold within you. And you can just have my peace. What God says that? There's no other God that says that. And there's no other God that offers his people rest. Divine, supernatural, awesome, amazing rest in the storm. He says, you can have mine. And so I want to read Genesis 2, verse 1, just for a minute here. At the end of, this is in the Passion, at the end of Genesis 1, it says, God surveyed all he had made, and he said, I love it. It's awesome. You know, for it pleased him greatly. And evening gave way to morning, day 6. So there were 6 days, and evening gave way to morning, evening gave way to morning, you know, and now it was day 6. And then it says at the beginning of chapter 2, and so the creation of the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. By the 7th day, God had completed creating his masterpiece. So on the 7th day, he rested from all his work. So he blessed the 7th day, and he made it sacred, because on it he paused to rest from all his works of creation. Now in that, first of all, we learned that everything he created, and he created everything that exists, he created. Nothing can exist outside of him. We've talked about that recently, and we'll talk about it more. But he looked at all of it and said, you know what? It's exactly the way I want it. That's exactly the way I imagined it, and it's perfect, just as it is. Now, he said, it's all finished. And then on the cross, Jesus said, teletestai kala. It is finished, my bride. And he reiterated that the restoration of that perfection had been finished. The work, he said, it is now finished, just like God said in Genesis 2:1. So the seventh day, unlike the first through the sixth, did not have evening and morning, a beginning and an end. The seventh day continues eternally, and we are living in that seventh day when we live in his presence. When we join ourselves to him, we are living in the eternity of God's rest. That's what he has offered us. And the question is, how do we get there? And how do we maintain it? We're going to talk about that. So God's rest, when he said he rested from all his work, it doesn't mean he was so exhausted he flopped back in the Easy Boy and turned on reruns and started, eating pizza and bonbons. It wasn't like that. He rested because he was fully satisfied with what he'd made. And it was like, it's so good. It's perfect, just as it is. So then Jesus now says in John 5, Jesus is being, assailed by the Pharisees because he healed someone on the Sabbath. And sort of the spiritual picture of the Sabbath had been somewhat lost in the legalism of the time. And so they were accusing him of breaking the Sabbath, basically. And Jesus said, he said, man was not made for the Sabbath was made for man. Isn't that great? Isn't that just awesome? The Sabbath was made for us. And he said, he is Lord of the Sabbath. And he said, and my Father has been working until now. So what does it mean? He ceased from his labors, but he says, my Father's been working and working and I'm going to keep working too, because I'm just like him. What is the eternal work of God? If you read through John 5, basically what you get is that the continuing work of God is to impart life. And if you look at John 10:10, it's just we're so familiar to us, but it's so amazing. Jesus says, the enemy comes only to steal, kill, and destroy, but I have come that you may have and enjoy life to the full, abundantly, till it literally overflows. And there is no caveat with that. He doesn't say, there are conditions to this. Well, if you have just lost your job, or you're going to lose your house, or someone is really sick, well, I understand why you can't find life in me. He didn't say that. He said, if you join yourself with me, I have come so that you can have life. I am here to impart life to you in any and every situation. And so, it says in Romans, and I'm not sure which one it is, it might be 11 or 12, it says that the second Adam, which is Jesus, is a life-giving spirit. And in John 20, it says he breathed on his disciples and he said, receive the sacred breath, the breath of life. And we are called to be life-giving spirits to this beautiful shadowed planet of ours. We are called to be life-giving spirits here. So there are two keys so far to being able to enter his divine rest. One is we don't want to harden our hearts. And the second is we want to make sure that we impart life, that we're imparting life. So I want to read Jeremiah 29:7. In Jeremiah 29:7, the people of God, the Israelites, the Jews, have been taken forcibly from Jerusalem, and they have been taken to Babylon. They've been taken to a pagan nation where it's really hard for them to keep their dietary laws. It's just they're worshiping lots of gods. They're worshiping the king, and it's a really pagan place. And I'm sure it was a shock to their system. They were taken. Some of them were taken as slaves. Some of them were not. But they were all taken kind of against their will to this place that was completely, from their point of view, I mean, spiritual cooties, okay, compared to living under the Jewish law, okay, with God. And what does he say here? Does he say, well, what does he tell the people to do? When I talk about imparting life, I'm talking about words and a heart position, and we'll talk about it a little more. But, I hear people say, oh, this is a terrible place to live. The weather's horrible. My boss is terrible. My children are ungrateful. I mean, just cursing and cursing and cursing the circumstances that we're in. We are not called to curse the circumstances that we're in. We are called to impart life. And so God says this. He says, seek the peace of the city where I have caused you to be carried away captive, and pray to the Lord for the city. For in its peace, you will have peace. So I just kind of want to put that, I feel like that is kind of a template for all of our circumstances. That so often we are not imparting life to our circumstances. We are kind of imparting death. We're describing what we're seeing in a way that does not invite or even acknowledge the power of God to change it or to be in it for me. So, I'm going to talk about how we can access that authority. But I just want to say, lots of times our circumstances do get changed. But sometimes we're in a season where they're not changed. And we are still called to impart life to those circumstances. Our maturity, in a sense, is expressed in our words. You can hear it. And our words come from our heart. And we all want formulas. Just tell me how to do it. Add 2 and 2, get 4, perfect. Just tell me what to say and how to say it, and so that God can come and change everything. We want formulas. I understand that. We want to control outcomes. But the problem with that is that a formula doesn't work because it's not about ritual, it's about relationship. And the heart can't really fake it, in all honesty. Our words and the words come from emotions, the emotions come from our heart. And that's why Proverbs 4:23 says, above all things, guard your heart, because out of it come the limitations of your life. In other words, Jesus says in John, I have it here somewhere. You guys know where he says it. But anyway, I think it's Luke 6. But he says that the heart produces. We talk about that here all the time. The heart produces whether we want it to or not. That's the thing. It's not like something we do. We can do it intentionally, but we do it unintentionally as well, because our words come out of our heart, and Jesus says that our words are producing the reality around us. The heart produces. This is the way the universe is constructed. It's set up like this. In fact, God created the worlds with words. Our words are containers of faith. We need to be careful about our words, but we need to be even more careful about what we allow, what we host in our hearts. Because we can be careful with our words to an extent, and we want to be very meta-aware of the kind of words we say, because words have tremendous power. But our words come out of our heart. And so what we really need to watch is what's in our heart. So Hebrews 3:19 says that those Israelites that were wandering around in the desert for 40 years couldn't enter God's rest because of their unbelief. A hard heart equals unbelief. And what is our heart hard about? Our heart is hard toward God. That's the whole point. That's it. Whenever our heart is hardened toward a person, toward circumstances, something that's happened to us, it's actually a judgment against God. Because we all know, hey, he's big and powerful and he didn't do anything. Or, why did he allow this to happen? Or that sort of thing. So we have to be very just conscious of what we are allowing what we're nurturing in our hearts. And I don't mean that we have to be Pollyannas, we don't have to be unreal, we can be real. But David is a perfect example of this, because David says, oh, my tears are soaking my pillow, and all my enemies are around me, and even my kids are against me, and just totally victimized by his life. But then he doesn't end that way. He doesn't end with an arraignment against God. The way he pours out his heart. But what he says is, but you, I look to you. Because through you, I can jump over a wall. Through you, I can leap over an entire army. It's through you that I'm going to see my victory. So we want to come to him with a true heart. We don't have to come as Pollyannas. Nothing bad ever happens to me. Everything is just fabulous all the time. Although, actually, in a lot of ways, around here it kind of is. But anyway. But still, in the regular world, but we don't want it to result in an arraignment against God's goodness. And the only way that I know how to forestall that, how to eliminate that, is to make it our great quest to actually get a revelation of his Father love, of his continuing goodness. I always tell people, I could just lose everything. Everything could crash. I could lose all the people I love and my house and everything and just be standing on just a little place. I might be pretty freaked out, close to the frontiers of sanity, but it would never occur to me that God doesn't love me. It's never even on the radar. It's never an issue. And so in our circumstances, we have to make sure that we are not ever gauging or measuring God's love by circumstances. Because for the enemy, he's like, this is so easy. I'll just flip around in their circumstances. That's the situation, So we have to measure his love by the cross. Yeah. And from that revelation, everything else comes, Let's see here. One of the universe is constructed in such a way that it responds to the I am. It responds to its creator. One of the things we're learning here at Open Heaven is that the creation is not nearly as dead as we have been possibly led to believe. That the creation responds to the I am. In Romans 8, it's quite clear. It's just as clear as day. Paul says that the creation itself is on tiptoe, breathlessly waiting for the mature sons of God to be revealed, to rescue it, to rescue the creation from its futility that it did not choose. The futility meaning endless cycles of birth, death, deterioration, coming alive again. That's the futility. It's the endless cycles, the repetitive cycles that are not eternal, vibrant life. And so the creation responds, and I'll tell you what, you'd be surprised if you get into a certain if you get into God's rest, and we'll talk about how like practical hacks, how to do that. Get into a certain realm, a realm opens. The creation responds to our words. It really does respond. Now, I'm not trying to give anybody a formula. Oh, if I just speak to my circumstances, they'll magically turn around. Because I can't fake my heart position. I can say the words, but if my heart isn't really in it, that's why we have to be so careful that there's no obstruction in our heart toward him. We have to be really, really careful. When I was in, a long, long time ago, I had a different husband, many of you know, not angelic like this one, and sort of unangelic, but a better person now, just let it be known. But at that time, really hard. And so I had 2 little kids, and we were about to lose our house. And a friend of mine said to me, wow, what are you going to do? You're going to lose your house. What are you going to do? And I said, well, Psalm 23 tells me that he'll spread a table before me in the presence of my enemies. So If the enemy's skirmishing over here, taking the house, I expect to be feasting over here in some kind of way. I mean, maybe my kids will be flourishing or win the spelling bee, or maybe I'll make some new friends. I mean, I don't know. But I expect to feast over here, you know. And so the point was, the thought storm that was coming my way didn't have any traction. Like, there wasn't any Velcro. And it kind of passed by, and, you know, we didn't lose our house, you know. His shalom, his rest, is not the absence of skirmishes. It's not the absence of circumstances. It is peace and confidence and joy and hope in the midst of it. Because we live in what we call a fallen world, and things go up and down, and we can't control everything. I mean, I can have the most positive, you know, in the realm, in the zone, in his presence kind of outlook, but, you know, there is a collective consciousness, and, you know, sometimes collective consciousness just kind of has the day, you know, temporarily anyway. So I need to be able to access the realm of that. That place of rest is a place of tremendous joy, because it's in his presence. And he says in Psalm 16:11 that in his presence is bliss. We're constructed for bliss. We're made for bliss. We're made for it. Now, we're not robots. Things happen. We experience losses, and we can feel that. But it's somewhat like snow on a wet pavement. I mean, it's there, but then it's gone because I can get back into his presence. And he never said, nothing bad will ever happen to you. He just said, you hold my hand, sugar. It's going to be a lot better than you think, you know. And so just walk with me. So there's two kinds of stress, and not all kinds of stress are bad. There's something called hormetic stress. Hormetic stress is the kind of stress that's more like a challenge, and it's what helps us to grow and change and get stronger. If you are learning to tie your shoe, and this is especially true for me as a lefty, if you're left-handed and someone's teaching you to tie your shoe, they're always right-handed, and we do it differently, and it's very stressful, okay? And you have to kind of push through till you finally are able to tie your shoe. So, but then when you can, it's awesome. Like, you just feel so good. So if you go to the gym and you're lifting weights or working out, you know, you're lifting more than you think you can, or you're pushing your muscles. And how do your muscles grow? They tear a little bit, and then they repair, and that's how they grow. That's how they grow bigger. You know, if you're learning to play the keyboards, or you're learning a language or anything, you have to kind of push. There's a kind of stress to that, but that's how we grow. Without it, we would just be static, and then just get weaker and weaker and weaker. So not all stress is really bad. We need stress in our lives, and that's a good kind of stress. It's called hormetic stress. So just because something is happening, we go, oh no, like I should just be in total stasis, like everything should just be on the mountaintop and there shouldn't be anything else. That's not really what makes us grow and makes us even and challenges us and takes us further and further and further into revelation of who he is. But there is another kind of stress that's chronic stress. And the world is trying to immerse us in a kind of chronic stress. How many people here think that our culture at the moment is really restful? Okay, not seeing any hands. All right, well, yeah. So our culture pushes us. It's a pressurized kind of culture. And there's a lot of excitement in that. There's a lot of options. But if we allow chronic stress to become a part of our lives, chronic stress is not just a feeling. It's a physiological reaction. It's cortisol, it's other hormones, it's a diminishment of dopamine, norepinephrine, oxytocin, the stuff that makes us feel the happy brain chems. And so we do not want to let chronic stress ever become a reality for us. Chronic stress is very, very dysfunctional mentally, physically, emotionally, and in every possible way. So fight, flight, or freeze is supposed to be quick. Like, we're supposed to, like, I see the bear, run, flight. Cortisol kicks in, it's good, because it makes me run faster than I normally would. Actually, I think when you see a bear, you're supposed to freeze. But I'm just saying, as an example, you know. Yeah, so the point is, the cortisol makes you go faster, stronger than you thought you could, and that's good, because it's supposed to be a short burst. It's not supposed to be chronically being released into our bodies, making us weaker and you know, more depressed and feeling more defeated and having less energy and all that kind of stuff. So that's why our God knows this. He knows everything about what we're going through. And so he has given us something called the Sabbath. And the Sabbath is just more awesome than we could ever imagine. And he's offered it to us in the indwelling Christ. So what are some of the features? We're going to go into some practical stuff in a few minutes, but one of the first thing is that it needs to be a very high value. We need to want this. We need to we want to be able to access it as often as possible for long periods of time in any kind of circumstance. So we want it to be a really high value. That's the first thing, is intent, is our intention. I want to learn to experience it, and I want to learn to maintain it and be able to access it whenever I want to. Joy is really, really important. I think a lot of Christians don't think of joy as kind of like icing on the cake. I mean, joy is the cake. I mean, it's actually the bread. I mean, joy is just essential. And our joy should not be diminished. I mean, I understand we have losses, and maybe my joy is down for a little bit. Basically, I want to keep my joy meter high, and it cannot be circumstantial. If it's circumstantial, I'm in trouble, because I live in a beautiful, shadowed, challenged planet. And so I need to keep my joy level high intentionally. And I do that with, I keep it high with increasing revelations of his goodness and his love toward me. In Isaiah 45, Isaiah 54, he says, look, I made it all. I mean, goodness, badness, good, evil, disease, you know, health, the inside, the outside, the up, the down, all that, calamity, blessing. Look, I made it all. But only the good stuff is supposed to come to you, because you belong to me. Yeah, I made a universe in which calamity can exist. And that was part of my deep wisdom. But it's not going to come near you, because you belong to me. And you shelter under my wings. You shelter in me. I'm your shelter. So we want to be aware of our words. Now, we don't want our words to just be empty formulas, but we still do want to be aware of our words. So if I start saying something that is actually a curse on my circumstance, it doesn't have to be a 4-letter word to be a curse. Just say, this is a horrible drag. That's a curse, you know, right there. I have to be careful about some things. Stephen is such a wonderful reminder, because just as a kind of a lightweight example, I'm kind of a weather snob, because I lived in Colorado for 20 years. And in Colorado, you have bright, brilliant sunshine 360 days a year, and the sky is a deep blue, and there's hardly any humidity. I mean, you know, it's a semi-desert. And it's just that hardly ever rains. If it does, it's just a few minutes, you know. Because the air is so thin and the sun's so bright, in the winter, if it's 50, it feels like 65. So, yeah, I'm kind of a weather snob. So I have to be kind of careful, because I can look around and go, ahem. Steve goes, now, it's our weather, so we want to impart life. So we kind of remind each other when we are about to do something that is less than the impartation of life to a circumstance or something like that. So one of the things that we need to ask God for is continuing revelation that his plans for me are always good. He is not bringing circumstances to test me. The world does that. God doesn't have to, because the world does that already. We live in a consequences kind of world. We live in a world that's under the law. We've been transcended out of the law, but the world lives in this good, bad, up, down, weighing, measuring, performance, not good enough, that kind of thing, not enough, chasing after it. That's the limited resources. That's the world's message. That's not the message that God gives us about the kingdom that we actually live in. We live in a different ecosystem. We live in the ecosystem of delight, the ecosystem of heaven. And we need to learn how to access that. So we need to recognize my circumstances may be crashing, but God's plans for me are good. They're always good. They're always imparting life to me. But I need to recognize that and be open to it. So one of the things that keeps us from the realm of rest is entanglements that are too intense. We've talked about this before, that we get so attached to a particular outcome. We're so focused on the outcome. Please, please, please. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. And that's kind of like the extent, of our prayer life. But there's a lot of please, please, please. And that please, please, please is not coming from a place of Sabbath rest where we can actually co-create with him. That is coming from a place of fear. And so often our circumstance that we desperately, I say desperately, we want our circumstance to work out in a certain way. And if it doesn't, somebody needs to pay. and often we actually start arraigning God or blaming God. Once again, if I am going to measure his love for me by circumstances in a changing world, I am going to be constantly wondering if he loves me or not. He loves me not. He loves me not, depending on the circumstance. So that does not put us in a place of authority, co-creation, and it's a sonship, it's a revelation of sonship that it's a deficit. We don't really know what we've been given. I think the reason sometimes that people aren't excited about their salvation, they're not excited about God, they don't know what we have. We've been given, Jesus shares his whole inheritance with us. That's so amazing. He transcends us when we're born again to live, from heaven, not just from here, literally from heaven with him. And so we're bilocated, and we've talked about that a lot. But the thing is, if I love it or hate it, I'm stuck to it. I'm stuck in it. And so if I'm reduced to the crude elements of the limitations of the world system, because that's all that's being offered in that intense. It has to be this way. If I don't, if so-and-so doesn't get healed, if I don't get the promotion, if I lose the house, if, I've got to have it. I understand those feelings. I feel that way sometimes. Sheesh. But what I realize is, if I'm going to stay in his rest, I need to take a step back and recognize that whether I win it or lose it this time, his goodness is constantly available to me. And if I don't get this promotion, I'll get another one or a different job, And even if I lose someone that I really love, his presence is still with me. The justice of the cross means that I am recompensed for everything that's been taken from me. I may have to get it mystically. That's kind of a different teaching. But out of his riches and glory, the Father his riches and glory in Christ Jesus, the Father makes sure that everything that's owed to me gets paid to me. That's one of the things that happened on the cross. All the debts get paid. Not just my debt that I owe to you because I did something damaging to you, I sinned against you, but everything that you took from me. Sometimes you can give it back to me, but sometimes that's not possible. You don't have it to give. And so I need to get that. I need to get it from the cross. I need to remember that. I need to constantly remember that I am losing nothing in Christ Jesus. It is all additive. It's all additive. There's nothing that is ever lost. Everything is available to me, and I think it's in, let's see where I have here somewhere. I think it is in, Colossians 2, verse 2, basically says, there's a verse before that, but it basically says, the revelation of his comfort, the revelation of his love, this actually is what gives us access to the treasures of heaven. So people want to do this for God and want to do that for God and want to do everything else for God, and that's really great. But the actual truth is that what we need to be focusing on is enlarging our capacity to receive his love into our lives, just continually enlarging our hearts to receive more and more and more of his love, because that is what gives us truly the access to the treasures of heaven, of which one of the most beautiful ones is this incredible Sabbath rest. Now, the idea of kind of stepping back and not being so attached, this is not like mystical rocket science. Basically, every Olympic athlete, every high achiever knows this. This is just the way the universe is constructed. That too much insistence, too much persistence attracts resistance. That's just how it is. And so it doesn't mean my intention isn't strong. It doesn't mean I don't want things, but it means I'm holding them loosely so that God can move. I don't have my hands so tightly squeezing my heart like I have to have this outcome, so that if it's not this way, I don't know how God's going to do it. I have no idea. But I know that he wants to work everything out for me for my good. And what I'm seeing right now is sometimes just a part of the picture. It's part of the unfinished good. And yet I focus on it and say, that's it. If I don't get that, I'm not good anymore. Something is really wrong, So one of the ways I step back, and now I just want to say, this is not apathy. This is not abdication. This is not que sera, sera. Like, oh, well, whatever, It's not like that. It's an active confidence in his goodness, his grace, and his power in my life. It's an active believing and knowing that whatever is going on, he wants the very best for me. He has planned such good things for me before the foundation of the world. And I need to be able to trust that. It doesn't mean there won't be some valleys. It doesn't mean I might not have to go through some things. But in it, it never occurs to me, all right, this is all there is. I guess he's just not on the job. Like, I don't know. It says the God of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps, but hey, wake up. I need something. It's not like that. So whatever's going on, I always know that his power is available to me. His presence is available to me. And I can access that anytime. And he will work through it. He will definitely work through it. I need to have some patience, because without patience, again, my impatience is a judgment against God. That's what it is. Faith, when you really have faith, like when you're really living in faith, not just like, I hope, and hope is good. Hope leads us to faith. But in real faith, I don't care if it happens today, tomorrow, or 5 years from now, because I have it already. It's the substance of something I hope for. It's the real stuff. It's the title deed. I already have it. I just don't see it. When you go to a closing, and you buy a house, you get the deed. You don't have the house yet. You know it's there, though, the confidence. The confidence is there. So Hebrews 4:9 says, strive to enter into this rest. Sounds like an oxymoron to me. How do you strive to stop striving? Sounds kind of crazy, right? It's not. It makes perfect sense. One of the ways that we strive to enter his rest is by learning to collect stillness. We talk about that a lot here. Sometimes in certain streams of the church, they say like people should meditate and all that. But meditating, slowing down your breathing, slowing down your thoughts, learning to come into stillness is learning to come into pure presence. The pureness of his presence, where there's no conflict, there's no striving, there's not wanting this, that, or the other thing, but just simply being in his presence. And when we learn to come into stillness, it doesn't have to take hours and hours. It does take a little practice. There's a bit of striving to unstrive in this. Learning to unstrive takes a bit of discipline, a bit of just simply going after it and practicing it. When you learn to do that, you find that it starts healing your nervous system. Your nervous system starts calming down so it's not being triggered by every wind of circumstance, every difficulty, every conflict, every thought storm that comes through the airwaves and through news that we read and people we talk to and all that sort of thing. Coming into stillness doesn't have to be hours and hours every day. Nice, but let's not make the perfect the enemy of the good. So just practice it like maybe 10 or 15 minutes a day. Then take it up to a half an hour. Pretty much everybody can afford a half an hour. If you want to go longer, great. But if you do it regularly, you'll find that you enter that rest, and you'll find that you love it there, and that there is joy there, and that you start hearing his voice there, and his presence is there, and your nervous system starts being healed from trauma. There's specific ways to heal trauma, and I understand that, but I'm talking in general. Just living in a fallen world is kind of a trauma. Has anybody ever noticed? That it's kind of traumatic just being here, And so if you, if we practice stillness and we start, as we say, collecting stillness means that we become so comfortable with it that we can kind of access it easily. That's what it means to collect stillness. It means that we start enjoying it, we have confidence in it, and it's easy to enter into it. In the beginning, it takes some striving to unstrive. But in the beginning, it takes a little doing, watching we're not going to actually this is not a meditation workshop, but just slowing down your breathing, letting the thoughts become slower. The main thing is you don't let the thoughts become a chat thread. They may come, but they come and go. You don't just follow them out. And you sort of learn to do that. And you'll find that in that stillness, there really is a kind of peace that passes all comprehension. Doesn't make sense because you can find it in the midst of a storm, a circumstantial storm. Something terrible, in a sense, something difficult, something hard may be happening. Go into stillness. Access the realm of his pure presence. Let him love you. Let him put his wraparound presence around you and collect the stillness of his presence so that even when you're talking to difficult people, you're dealing... a lot of times the difficulties of circumstances are actually just practical problems that we need to work out, and yet we assign emotional values to it, and that's really a lot of the problem. I mean, some things, some losses are deep. Some, people are irreplaceable, and I'm not trying to belittle that at all. But a lot of our conflicts, circumstances, storms, have to do with practical stuff that we just need to work through, and yet we assign it a brand. Terrible, horrible, destructive, I hate this is awful, Instead of saying, wow, this is a real challenge, but God, this is a perfect opportunity for you to just just be amazing. Just show up and do something fantastic. I'm totally open. I mean, whatever you want to do, I'm ready, I'm here. So one of the main ways that we are able to access his rest and to stay in it is to learn to come into stillness. And another way is not to be so incredibly attached through fear, anger, and bitterness to a particular outcome that we basically, those severe attachments are actually, this is the big one, they're actually judgments against God. And that's the truth. Because all unbelief is a judgment against him. He's not big enough, he's not good enough, he's not powerful enough, he doesn't have enough grace, doesn't care enough about me. Every super attachment, every too much persistence is fear. That fear is unbelief, and that unbelief is a judgment against him. And when we're making judgments against him, we cannot receive the blessings that he died to give us. We can't live in the constant realm of his blessing if we're making judgments against him, which is a kind of way of rejecting him, out of our lives and out of the circumstance. So it's not that we don't want a particular outcome, but we don't become so immersed in that outcome. We don't allow fear to basically tell us, if you don't get it this way, I'm telling you, everything's falling apart, it's horrible, he doesn't care about you, this is going to happen, that's going to happen, and before you know it, the chat thread is down, down, down. Instead of us saying, you know what, this is pretty tough, it's not easy, but you know what, God? You never asked it to be easy. You are perfect for any circumstance that is not easy, because your power can override everything. Your goodness toward me is never something I ever question. There's some questions that just have to be answered once and for all. Is he good to me or not? And it can't be circumstances, because he loves me. Oh, he loves me not. He loves me. Oh, he loves me not. Depending on where I am in the circumstance cycle, he loves me or he doesn't love me. It just can't be like that, because he doesn't change, and his love for me doesn't change. So my revelation of his goodness to me should be the one unassailable, absolute bedrock reality of my life. I never, ever question that. So let me see here. Our thoughts are magnets, because our thoughts are frequencies, and everything is a frequency. An orange has a frequency, a musical note has a frequency, everything has a frequency. So our thoughts are frequencies, of course, and frequencies, once again, the way the universe is set up, frequencies attract like frequencies. So our thoughts are magnets, and we need to be kind of careful what kind of thoughts we're hosting. I mean, like I say, we're not robots and we're not perfect. But when we see a chat thread in our thoughts that is blaming God, being disappointed in him, feeling hopeless, victimized, or defeated, man, we want to punish that thing immediately and bring it captive and remind ourselves, hey, this is the God of the universe. He can do anything for me, and he will do anything for me, and he has done anything for me. When he came here to go to the cross, that took will, intention, focus. I mean, he paid the highest price ever paid for anything in the history of the universe so that I could know that I am precious and that I am loved and that I can live a transcended life. That my life is not limited to this. You know, I sometimes we can get annoyed with people who, you know, have annoying attitudes, you know, or positions or something. But I think to myself, what would it be like to really only have the next horrible headline? What would that be like in life? Not to have Jesus. I don't even want to imagine it. I just don't want to imagine it. So when we are too immersed, too intensely persisting, we can't really exercise our authority or our sonship from that place, because that place is a place of basically fear, and it's a place of judgment. Our fears about circumstances are basically, it's a type of unbelief. One of the things that can really help us to stay in a practical thing that's also really mystical and practical, you can't beat that for a combination, is if to stay in Sabbath rest is to take communion. Take communion. I mean, Steve and I take communion almost every day. It's not every day, but it's almost every day. Sometimes I take it twice a day. If I'm fasting or something and I'm having a hard time, sometimes I take it twice a day. But if I was in a difficult situation, if circumstances were skirmishing around and stuff and this and that, definitely take communion and receive his endless, indestructible life deeply, deeply, deeply into the very deepest parts of my being. And that in itself is a way of stepping back and not worrying about the circumstance, you know. Breathing is really his breath in our lungs, and as we've talked about here before, it's another teaching, but every time we say the name Yahweh, we're breathing his name. Every time we breathe, in a sense, we're saying his name. When he changed Abram's name to Abraham, what did he put in it? When he changed Sarai's name to Sarah, what did he put in it? His breath. And we can learn. We've done breathing exercises here. We'll probably do them again, you know. But there's lots of breathing exercises on the internet. Breathing to relax the nervous system, to slow down the thoughts. Breathing is something that is available to all of us, and it is awesome. It is an awesome way to change our mental state. It's an awesome way to change our emotional state and to come into integration. Breathing gives us, it integrates the body and soul with the spirit in a lot of ways. Breathing, just learning to breathe. And you can do that at a difficult interview. You can do that during an argument with someone. You can do that when you're reading the news. You can do that anytime. And so it's really important. We want to become conscious of breath, and we want to become conscious of our words. And believe it or not, this sounds like, oh my goodness, Deborah, all this rest sounds like so much work. But when you get used to it, it really isn't. It's actually joyful and fun and easy and automatic. I mean, it becomes almost. Say that again? And there's absolute fruit from it, and the fruit is almost immediate, and it just keeps growing. The fruit just keeps getting sweeter and sweeter and sweeter. When we are too attached to a particular outcome, it really comes from an orphan spirit. It comes from a spirit that doesn't have a revelation of his protective father love. So that's just kind of something to kind of remember, that if I'm too afraid, too attached to a particular outcome, that's not coming from a spirit of sonship, of belonging, of having a father, a rich dad who delights in me. It's coming from kind of a feeling of being an orphan. Like, I have to take care of myself because nobody else is going to take care of me, and I don't think I can do it. A long time ago, maybe 20 years ago or 25 years ago, it was a pretty long time ago, it was a kind of a difficult time in my life. It wasn't like horrible. It was pretty stressful for me. It had to do with work and some other things. And I remember the Lord said to me, Deborah, just let me take care of you. Just let me do it. You're trying to take care of yourself, and oh my goodness, my resources really are limited. Good grief. But he just said, Deborah, I'll take care of you. Just let me do it. Release it. Just release your life to me, and I'll take care of it. And once again, it's not an abdication. It's not like, oh, well, whatever. Woo! There's no life in that, you know? If someone says to you, well, whatever, you know, like, oh my goodness, no life. You're not imparting life, okay? Just not, you know? So our intensity, our extreme attachment to things, it's eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It's weighing and measuring, making judgments. This is going to work, that's not going to work, that kind of thing. But if we just kind of collect some stillness and step back, pardon me, yes, it comes from a traumatized nervous system. There's no question. And if we just collect some stillness, because we've been in stillness on a pretty regular basis, at least for maybe 20, 30 minutes a day, start out with 10. Like I said, don't make the perfect the enemy of the good. Set yourself up for success, you know. Then you step back and we can really learn to trust in His Father love, and we'll be able to eat from the tree of life, which is a continuing revelation of His goodness that is always available to us. Matthew 6 tells us that worrying can't even add 1 inch to our stature, you know. How many times does Jesus say, just stop being afraid? How many times does He say it? The reason He says it is because there's no life in fear. There isn't any life in fear ever. Fear is the way we kind of shut ourselves off from the flow of His favor and the flow of His goodness. So that's the other thing I want to talk about is, you know, we talk about Sabbath rest, and we talk about stepping back, not being so attached to circumstances that we can't see God in it, and see God through it, and know that His goodness is always available to me, even in a difficult circumstance. We're talking about flow. The universe is constructed along certain lines, and one of those lines can be described as flow. Flow is a kind of ongoing confidence in God's goodness and favor toward me. That's kind of what flow is, so that in any circumstance, I expect goodness. I expect to see Him move. You know, it may not be exactly the way I kind of envisioned it, but it's going to be really good. It's going to be really, really good. He just says over and over, just stop worrying, because the worrying separates us from Him. My fears can never be me in Him. They can only be me apart from Him. And so when I'm in Him, like when I'm in that place where I'm just His wraparound love is just all over me, and I feel the comfort of His presence. There's no fear in that. There's no striving, and there's no like excessive, like I need it to be this way, I need it to be that way, because in His presence are pleasures forevermore. In His presence is bliss. And I'm constructed for that. I'm made for it. You know, and so when I allow myself to get into it, the integration is perfect. There's no separation. The integration is perfect. And the traumas recede, they get healed. And the joy is what is really salient at that time. So let's see. Jesus says, if our eye is good, our whole body will be filled with light. If our eye is good, our whole body will be filled with revelation, understanding. What does it mean for our eye to be good? It's a whole other teaching, but basically, how are we seeing the circumstance? How are we seeing? Are we seeing the possibility of God's goodness in it? Or are we just seeing victimization, defeat, it's impossible? We need to train our eyes to see God everywhere we look. And then I just want to kind of finish by talking about an easy, excellent way, a hack into all of this. And that is, just take the risk and fall in love. Fall so in love. You know what it's like when you're in love? You feel like you kind of have a secret that kind of warms you all the time. You might be with people, you might be at work, you might be taking care of kids, you might be anywhere. But there's something on the inside makes you feel happy. It's like a personal kind of realm of delight that is just bubbling in you all the time. We call it falling in love because we're not careful. Just plunge. Just fall right in. Not being careful. I don't need to be, because he is someone I can totally and completely trust. So I can fall in love with him. And if you fall in love with him, talk some love talk, figure out how to do it, ask him to teach you. He's the author of love. He's the author and finisher of our faith, and he's the creator, the maintainer, and the constant fountain of love in the universe. And if you don't know how to fall in love, he will teach you. He's the best teacher. And that is the hack into all of this, is just simply falling in love. So I want to just finish off by everybody close your eyes if you would. I'm going to say something. Listen to me for just a couple minutes and just kind of hear it. You can do this on your own. The reason we're not all doing it together is just because I think it's going to be a little more powerful. Just I do it. We have all the noise. And you'll see what I mean in a minute. And then we'll just slow down our breath for just a couple of minutes. And then we'll just continue in celebration eternally. So just listen. Close your eyes. Let your breathing just be kind of easy. Particularly notice your exhale. Let it be slow, but not forced. And just listen to me. El Shaddai. El Shaddai. El Shaddai. Just let your breathing be slow and relaxed. And just remember that you are loved and you are his eternal delight. And just relax in his love and in knowing that the one who loves you is the king of everything. He's El Elyon, the one who is in charge of everything because he created everything. And his plans for you are always good. Thank you. Just so you know, I was not invoking El Shaddai, the God who is more than enough. I was embodying El Shaddai. And you can do that with any name of God. That kind of like, if you need the angel armies to fight for you, you can do El Sabaoth. If you need, finance, you need sort of provision, Jehovah, Jireh. The universe responds to the I am. The universe responds to the names. It recognizes the frequency of the names of the I am. And it is one way to come into stillness. Thank you.